Lucas stood outside his father's study, hand resting on the doorknob without turning it. This was the third time this week he'd stood here, and every time, he pulled his hand back before he could knock. Inside, Don Romano sat alone, the desk lamp casting sharp lines of light and shadow across his face. He didn't look up, but he knew his son was standing there. He always knew. "Come in," he said, without turning his head. Lucas pushed the door open and stepped inside, arms crossed over his chest as if to hide the trembling. "I want to learn," he said flatly, no circling around it like all the times before. "Learn what?" "You know what I want to learn." Don Romano set down his pen. 12 years old. The same age he'd been when he first stood in his own father's study, saying those exact words, with that same hungry look in his eyes. "No," he said. "You learned when you were 12. Grandfather told me." Grandfather tells a lot of stories he shouldn't. Lucas stepped closer to the desk, his voice hardening. "I don't want to do homework my whole life while Victor stands guard outside my door. I want to know how to protect my own family. What do you think I learned when I was 12? The question stopped Lucas cold. He didn't have an answer ready. Don Romano stood, walked around the desk, and stood in front of his son, towering over him, his shadow stretching long across the wooden floor. "I learned how to pull the trigger of a gun," he said, his voice unwavering. "And that night, I didn't sleep for 3 months straight." Lucas said nothing. "You think that made me stronger?" "It aged me 20 years in a single night." "But you managed. You survived. You still protected Mom, Emma, me. Because I had no other choice at that moment." "You do." Lucas turned away, looking out the window, where the garden lights cast the row of juniper trees into silent, standing sentries. "I'm tired of always being the kid in this house," he said, his voice quieter now. "Emma's little, everyone's right to protect her. But I'm 12 now. I see Victor checking his gun before he goes out. I see Mom crying when she thinks no one's watching. I'm not clueless, Dad. I'm just not allowed to know anything." Don Romano stayed silent for a long moment. Something in his son's words struck a place he himself had once felt, long ago, when he was a boy standing before his own father, begging to be treated like a man. "Do you want to know the truth," he said finally, "or do you want power?" "I don't know the difference." That's exactly the answer I needed. He placed a hand on his son's shoulder. A man who asks for power before he understands the truth ends up using that power the wrong way. I've seen that kill more people than bullets ever have. Lucas looked at his father, eyes caught somewhere between anger and hurt. "So how long do you plan on hiding it from me?" "I'm not hiding everything from you." Don Romano walked to the desk drawer and pulled out an old leather notebook, its corners worn soft, and set it on the table between them. "This is your grandfather's journal. Not about guns or money. About the decisions he came to regret." Lucas looked at the notebook without touching it. "You want to learn how to become a man like me," Don Romano said, "then first you need to learn how to live with what I've had to carry for 30 years. Not the gun. The price you pay after you pull the trigger. So you'll teach me. I'll teach you to read this notebook first. If, after that, you still want to learn the rest, I will. Then we'll talk again." Lucas picked up the notebook, his hand trembling slightly, as if its weight far exceeded its size. Outside the door, Sophia stood pressed against the wall, not daring to step in, silent tears falling though she hadn't meant to cry. She'd heard everything. And she knew that even as her husband had just turned down a gun, he had opened another door instead, one that might be far more dangerous. That night, Lucas sat in his room until deep into the night, the desk lamp glowing beneath the door, turning page after page of his grandfather's yellowed notebook. On the last page he read, there was a line written in a shaking hand, as if the writer had been crying when he set down the pen, "If my son ever reads these words, I only hope he chooses a different path than mine." Lucas closed the notebook and looked out at the dark window. He didn't yet know which path he would choose. But he knew one thing, from tonight on, he was no longer the child standing outside the door.